Welcome to Tattooed Tabletop. My name is James, and as you can see in the title, today we are doing Warhammer HOT Takes. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that I have some opinions that may or may not be very popular in the Warhammer-based community. Again, I've been into the hobby for about 5 or 6 years now, where that's when I bought my first models, that's when I first got into it, but I first discovered Warhammer long before that. I played a lot of the games, and that's what really brought me in, and that brought me to the Wikipedia pages, and that's where I really found my love of Warhammer. Now, let's dive into 3 of my hot takes for Warhammer. Starting with number 1, GW did the right thing blowing the old world up. That's right, I said it. They did the right thing destroying the old world. Now, I'm not going to defend how they handled destroying the old world because we've all read that and it's a little on the rough side. But why do I think that Age of Sigmar was the right way to go? Well, to me, as someone who was first introduced into the fantasy side of Warhammer through that fantasy element, a lot of it just felt like, at the end of the day, historical wargaming. Now, you recognize the names Emperor Karl Franz, you recognize Grimgor Ironhide, Kazrak One-Eye, Boris Todbringer. These are names of these characters in this particular setting that really kind of brought you into this world that already existed and famous battles that happened in that world. Now, you can still have a decent amount of time on the tabletop creating your own character, like maybe you've got your own Empire captain and he's named Bob and he did X, Y, and Z, and that allowed you that element of immersion. But I would argue that at the end of the day, Age of Sigmar did a better job of opening the world for you, allowing you to really kind of create your own wish fulfillment. When you did create that character, it was believable. You painted this Lord Imperatant, who was this soul that died during the first rise of chaos at the collapse of the realms, and it just made more sense. Not to mention that Age of Sigmar didn't have you stuck in this one map. So the old world had this very specific map. It had locations like Middenheim, it had locations like Itza, the city for the Seraphon, which back then were called the Lizard Men. I get it, it makes more sense. They're lizard, they stand on 2 feet, lizard men. But at the end of the day, Age of Sigmar really opened that world up. Now you have realms like Gur, you have realms like Haish, these other places where you could put any of these armies, any of these characters, square them up against each other in a battle that really made sense on the tabletop for you. Versus when you had that old world, you could have the Empire fight the Lizard Men, and they did have their fights, but it was still in a different place. It was in a different time. And that's what kind of locked you into that sort of narrative. Versus the Age of Sigmar world, where you can literally just take any of these characters, throw them into certain situations, into battles, or into conflicts with other factions, and it works. Not to mention, it took the middle fantasy of the old world and elevated it to a high fantasy, which, admittedly, is a bit of a difference of opinion. I also tend to like low fantasy, like Game of Thrones or things like that, but I do enjoy a certain element of Sigmar's world being this high fantasy. I enjoy these Stormcast Eternals who die and then are brought back up to Azir to be reforged on the Anvil of Apotheosis, and then they lose more of themselves. They lose their humanity, their memories, something like that. It's a very high fantasy concept, but at the end of the day, if the story's great, who cares? So for me, even though it wasn't handled the greatest way, I do think Games Workshop did do the right thing by blowing up the old world and ushering in the Age of Sigmar. Plus, old world's coming back. Hot take number 2. New rules are always fun. Now, as of filming this, 10th edition has been out for a few weeks now. We've gotten some games in. We've gotten to play with the new rules for the new models. And there's a bit of a feeling of negativity. I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, Warhammer fans not having fun with new rules? Who would have thought? So there were some arguments out there that said that 10th edition was too soon, and that they didn't get enough games of 9th edition. But let's be honest. 9th edition was out for 3 years. You had 3 years worth to get games out of it. And if you didn't, you didn't. That's totally fine. Hey, we all got busy lives. You got wives, you got kids, you got husbands. You run out of time at the end of the day. But realistically, the game's still got to move forward. So over those 3 years, I had been to RTTs, I had been to GTs. Dang it! I had been to the Las Vegas Open for the last ever 9th edition Grand Tournament. I was ready for 10th edition. And now hit the table?
Yeah, just harder.
Oh, okay. So now we're into the 10th edition, and there are some rules that are contentious. And that's understandable. Whenever we release a new rule set or we're exposed to a new rule set, there's a decent chance that there's going to be mistakes. But what's the alternative? Let's take, for example, a game that maybe went completely untouched, unedited. You have the same rules from the beginning to the very end. You're telling me you wouldn't get bored? I would be bored. That means that whatever models you picked up, whatever rules you had, if they were bad rules, they would stay bad for forever. Wouldn't you want new rules? Wouldn't you want new models, new experiences? I'd argue yes. Again, some of you might disagree, but at the end of the day, regardless of what kind of state they come out in, new rules are always going to be more fun than being stuck with the same rules every single time. Third and final hot take for this episode. Believe me, there will be more hot takes that I have. But my third and final one today is Abaddon the Despoiler is a good villain. Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there that disagree, that think Abaddon the Despoiler has been rewritten to be a bigger badass than he actually is. But let's kind of break that down for a second. There's a lot of lore in the Horus Heresy that really sets up his character as he's kind of growing with the Sons of Horus and how he kind of develops his worldview. He's one of the few Space Marines, well, in this case, Chaos Space Marines, that really has a disdain for Horus, has a disdain for his Primarch. Now, that's not uncommon. Night Lords have the same disdain for Conrad. But at the end of the day, it really kind of adds to his character development. Flash forward 10,000 years and we're in the 41st millennium where there's only war. Well, there was only war before that. They have a lot of war. It adds up. But we flash forward to the 41st millennium and we have this character who has embarked on many, many Black Crusades. Now, as we know before the lore was really flushed out within the last couple years, each one of those crusades resulted in Abaddon failing, in the Chaos Space Marines failing. Now, do you really want a villain that just fails 13 times? I mean, we all have our limit. If you fail 13 times, there's a decent chance that you're not going for number 14. You're just gonna dust your hands off, go home, open a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos, maybe have, an energy drink, and you're probably just gonna call it a day. You're done. Doesn't matter. But with the new rewrites for Abaddon, we saw that each one of those crusades accomplished some smaller goal or some smaller task that's making its way to this grander narrative. And for any of you who have dove into the Arcs of Omen, you saw a bit more of our lovely little Chaos Leading Lord, and you saw that he had this grander scheme, this grander plan, which in turn brought in a new character, Vashtor, the Archaphane, which gave this grand narrative to Chaos. It gave this great motivation. And when it comes to villains, one thing that always resonates for me personally is there's something human to them. He's not just some evil villain who's rubbing his hands together thinking of the next way to destroy all of mankind. He's got a deeper plan in mind. He's got a deeper thought process. And the Arcs of Omen really dove into that. It really looked into him as a character and as this person who is blessed by all 4 of the Chaos Gods, but he doesn't like to be in their pocket. He has a resentment for them. He doesn't like being in service to them, and he wants to make sure that when he does accomplish his goal, that it's not due to Chaos or for Chaos, it's for him. And that makes a great villain. Again, you may agree, you may disagree. At the end of the day, he's a dude with the talent of Horus, and he's got a giant murder demon sword. What's so wrong with that? It's fantastic. You kidding me? That model. Mwah. painted it myself. He looks fantastic. I know the gold trim is like really rough on Chaos Marines. I mean, anyone who has Chaos Space Marines definitely has PTSD from having to paint all the trim on all these guys, but let me just say, you put him on the table, mwah, especially Abaddon. He's a fantastic model, and in my opinion, he's a fantastic villain. Now, after listening to all those hot takes, I want to hear what you have to say. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Definitely let us know in the comments. Just tell me what you think on any of them. Whether you think, hey, no, the old world should have kept existing, or maybe they should have just kept the game. Maybe you think new rules suck. I don't know. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of hot takes coming up as well. But as I said in the introduction, the whole goal of this channel is to keep it positive. It's fine to have criticisms, and it's fine to have opinions on these things, but hey, at the end of the day, we're all in this hobby because we love it. Until next time, I'm Tattooed Tabletop, and see you on the next one.
Better.
All right.
Really splice those two together.
Yeah, a little editing there. But yeah, see, nice little